Hello everyone, welcome to this video. So in this video we'll be doing a couple of things. We will set up Kubeflow. So as I said in the previous videos, Kubeflow runs on Kubernetes. So we will set up a Kubernetes cluster on the Google platform, and then we will use that Kubernetes cluster to set up Kubeflow. And then using Kubeflow, we will run our machine learning pipelines. So if this sounds confusing, don't worry, just watch the video. I'll leave some links in the description so that you can also read about Kubernetes and Kubeflow too. Or you can also watch the previous videos to know more about Kubernetes and Kubeflow. And so as I said in the previous video, our machine learning pipelines would run on some Docker images and some Docker containers, and those Docker containers running our machine learning pipelines will be orchestrated using Kubeflow. So the first thing we have to do is to write our Docker image for our machine learning pipeline. So this Docker image should contain all the libraries, all the Python libraries that we will need to run our machine learning pipeline. So things like TensorFlow, things like Tfx, things like pandas and NumPy. So libraries that you would normally need for machine learning pipeline. So let's go ahead and then write the Docker file for our machine learning pipeline. So I'm in my Visual Studio Code. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new file called Docker file. And unlike the previous video where we built our Docker images in the cloud, in this video we are going to build our Docker images on our local computers, right? So first let me write the Docker file. So I'm going to have a base image, and I'm going to use from Python 3.8, right? And then I'm going to copy requirements.txt, and I'm going to just put that in the current directory of the Docker file. And then I'm going to run pip install requirements.txt. All right, so then now I need to create the file for our requirements.txt. right? So what will be some of the things that we will need in requirements.txt? So the main idea is I want to use this Docker image also when we get to deploying machine learning models. So I'm going to install some libraries. Also, I'm just going to use some libraries that we might not use in our pipeline, but when we come to deployment, we might need those libraries. So let me just go ahead and sklearn matplotlib fast API uvcon tfx python snappy numpy pandas kfp, right? So KFP is Kubeflow, I think Kubeflow pipeline. It's a library that is used to run Kubeflow pipelines. So for now, these are the libraries that we will need. And what else do we have to do? So in the previous video, we used Gcloud builds to build our Docker images. We are going to use the same thing. So the next thing we have to do is we have to write a cloud build .yaml file which will specify the build order. So what will be our steps in the build order? So first we have a name, right? So the name is going to be gcr.io/cloud builders/docker, right? And then what are the arguments? So our arguments are going to be build, and then we tag our image. So whatever we are building needs to be tagged with a name. So that is gcr.io/ and then we need our project ID, right? So I'm just going to go here and then copy my project ID, which is this, and then I'm going to go back here and then paste it in there, right? And then I'll give it a name also. So I'm just going to call it ML image. Yeah, and you can give it any name, any name you want. I'm just going to call it ML image, and then I'm going to say that the build file, the Docker file, is in the current directory. So I'm just going to use a dot. The next step is we have to push, right? So when we finish building, we have to push. So it's going to be the same name, and then for the arguments, it's going to be push, and then we have this gcr all right. So this is our cloud build steps. So the next thing we have to do is to build this. So if you remember, we said we have to build it using Gcloud, right? Then builds submit config cloud build.yaml and then dot. If I click enter, you see I'm getting an error. So for most of the things that we are going to be doing, we'll be getting so many errors, right? So that you know how to fix these errors when you encounter them. It says Gcloud is not recognized as an internal or external command, operable program, or batch file. So we don't have Gcloud installed. So let's install Gcloud. So I'm on the Gcloud installation page. So you can install it for Linux, Ubuntu, Red Hat, Mac OS. I'm on Windows, so you can download the installer, or you can just copy the commands here and then run it in PowerShell. So I'm just going to copy the commands and then run it in PowerShell. So I'm just going to go there, click PowerShell. You can start PowerShell also from your command prompt, and then since I need to copy it again, copy. Oh, okay, it already worked. And so let's wait and see what happens. Okay, let me just close that again and then run it again. All right, so it started, and so you can just go ahead and then install that on your computer. Well, after waiting quite a while, the installation is done, so I'll click next and make sure all this is checked. So if you look at the last checkbox, it says run Gcloud init to configure the cloud SDK. Now, because we are working on a local environment which is not in the cloud, we need to authenticate Gcloud so that it can communicate with our resources on GCP. That's why we need to run Gcloud init. So we click finish, and we have this window opened. All right, so it says pick your configuration to use. So I'm going to enter one because I have already I had initialized Gcloud on my computer before. So if you haven't, then you have to initialize it, but I'm going to reinitialize again so that I show you how it's done. So I think if you haven't used Gcloud before and you run Gcloud init for the first time, you will see something about initializing a new configuration. So I'm just going to select 2, which is create a new configuration. But in your computer, it will be different. It might be 1 or something. So just read the commands here and then select the appropriate one. So I'm going to create a new configuration, and oh, sorry. So let me just run it again. In fact, let me just close it and then run it here. Gcloud init. So Gcloud init. So Gcloud init. Right. So yeah, reinitialize with new settings. So I'm just gonna click 1. Then yeah, if you haven't logged in before, you would have a prompt telling you to log in for the first time. But so I'm going to log in with a new account. So I'm just gonna just read the options given to you and select the most appropriate one. So I'm going to log in with a new account because I have already logged in previously. So I'm going to select 2, and then a tab will be opened for me. I have all these Google accounts. This is the one I'm using for this course, so I'm just going to click that one, and then I'm just going to click allow. So it says yeah, you are now authenticated with Cloud SDK. So yeah, so when I come back, you see it says you are logged in as that. Pick a cloud project to use. So this is my cloud project, which is the singular Willow 339022. So I'm gonna select one, and it says my current project has been set to that. The next thing is, do you want to configure a compute region and a zone? I'm going to click yes. So usually, so you have a list of all the zones here. Usually I use US Central 1. I use US Central 1 C, or yeah, I'm just going to type US Central 1A. So US Central 1, maybe C, yeah. All right, so yeah, so we have configured Gcloud. So let me see if everything is all right. So that's it. So that I'll just close that, and then yeah, let's go ahead and then push our Docker image to Google Container Registry. So to push this to our Google Container Registry, so we'll say Gcloud. So let me see if Gcloud is working. Still don't have, can still access. Okay, so Gcloud wasn't running because I had to restart my Visual Studio Code. So I have restarted my Visual Studio Code. So now I can run Gcloud builds submit config cloud build .yaml, and then we specify that the configuration, the YAML file, is in the current directory. I'm going to add something called timeout. Right now, usually it takes a long time depending on your network speed and things, a whole lot of things. So because we are pushing directly into the cloud, so sometimes yeah, if it takes a long time, it might just stop. So I'm just going to add a timeout of 10,000, and then I'm just going to run this. Hopefully there is no error. If we get an error, we would try and then fix it. So let me just pause and then come back to it. I'll come back again if there is an error, or it's finished building and pushing. So yes, we encountered our first error, and it says requirements.txt file not found. So I think I made a mistake when I was writing. It's supposed to be small r, not big R. So let's run it again. So okay, our push is done. So we have success here. If you're having any errors, you can leave a comment on this video, and then I'll respond and try and help you solve any errors you're facing. All right, so now let's go and then check out our image in our container registry. So I'm just GCR container registry, and then we have our image. So ML image. Yes, so this is the image we'll be using for our machine learning pipelines, right? So let's go ahead and then set up Kubeflow. So to set up Kubeflow, we need to set up a Kubernetes cluster. So I'll go down to Kubernetes engines and then click clusters. And then enable API, because I haven't used it for this account before. So the API has been enabled. Then I'll go here to create, and then we are presented with two options, GKE standard or GKE autopilot. We are going with GKE standard. So you can read more to know about the differences between GKE standard and GKE autopilot. So we go with GK standard, and then we have our cluster setup. So cluster name, we're just gonna go with cluster 1. The zone, so you remember we used US Central 1 when we were setting up Gcloud, so just go with US Central 1. We don't need to change anything on this page. Then we go to default pool. So the default pool, so what are the number of nodes? So a cluster is a collection of nodes, right? A node is a computer or a compute engine. So in a previous example, when we were setting up, when we were creating the image in the previous video, we used just one compute engine to create the image and also to deploy our Python app. So in this case, we are going to use 3 of those compute engines. So 3 computers or 3 nodes, right? Or 3 virtual machines. That's what we are going to use. So the number of nodes is 3. We are not going to enable auto scaling. So you can read about auto scaling. Auto scaling will create and delete nodes depending on your usage or your request. So if you need if you are doing more computationally expensive tasks, then auto scaling will add more nodes so that you can finish your tasks in time, things like that. We are not going to use auto scaling. We are just going to fix the number of nodes to be 3. Now we are going to choose the node types. So, and then the image. So the image that should run on this node, right? So what is the OS that should run on the nodes, right? We are going to go with, I think there is a bit of a problem with this container optimized OS and then container optimized OS with Docker when I'm running Kubeflow pipelines. So I'm just going to go with Ubuntu with Docker, and yeah, just to be safe. And then the machine configurations, I'm going to go with my favorite N1. And then Kubeflow, Kubeflow actually requires that you have a node be at least 4.5 gig of memory and 2 virtual CPUs. So we cannot use this to set up our node. So we just have to go with the 2 virtual CPUs and 7.5 gig memory. And yeah, I don't need to change anything here again. Let's go to security, which is important. And this is very, very important. We have to allow full access to all cloud APIs because I want my Kubernetes cluster to talk to Google Storage and other APIs in the GCP platform. So I should allow this. So allow full access to all cloud API. Metadata, we are not going to do anything here, and also in this section we are not going to do. So let me just see that if we have put everything together. So compute engine default account service, the nodes are okay. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and click create. This will take some time, so I'll just come back to the video when it's done. Okay, so we have set up our Kubernetes cluster, and it says number of nodes 3, total of vCPUs 6, because we had 2 vCPUs per node, and then our total memory is 22.5 gig because we had 7.5 gig per node. Here we see it says low resource request. Because we are not using our cluster for anything at the moment, so it says it's being underutilized. So if I go ahead and then open this cluster up, you see some configurations, and then you see the nodes also, the different nodes, and then the memory that has been currently allocated to each of the nodes, right? All right, so we have set up our Kubernetes cluster. If you want to delete your cluster, just click the 3 buttons here and then click delete. You delete our cluster. So let's go ahead and then set up the Kubeflow. So for set up Kubeflow, we have to go all the way down to artificial intelligence and then AI platform. So I'm just going to pin this to the top. Artificial intelligence, then we have dashboards, data labeling, pipelines. We go to pipelines, right? And then it says AI platform pipeline. So we go to new instance, and then configure. Right. So yeah, so it has already picked up the Kubernetes cluster that we created. So cluster 1, it's already picked it up. Or you can create a new cluster if you want. Namespace that we don't need to do anything again. We just go to accept and then we just click deploy. This will take a minute or two, so I'll come back when it's done. So our pipeline, Kubeflow pipeline creation is done. Yes, so everything is done. So we go again to AI platform pipelines, and then we go to open pipelines dashboard. It will take just yes, so this is our Kubeflow interface. So we can see some pipeline demos here. We can set up, create an experiment, runs, a recurring runs. We can see our artifacts, and as we go through creating our pipelines, we'll just be looking at some of these menu items over here. So the first thing we are going to do, so let's just see a demo pipeline. So let's look at this Tfx taxi tip prediction model trainer. So let's open that. Usually something I have to click YAML and then come back to graph before you can see the graph. So when we finish building our machine learning Tfx pipeline, we will have something like this, where you can see all the components and then their dependencies and then their outputs, right? So let's go ahead and then run this Tfx pipeline. So we just click here, so create run, and then we have demo. We just leave this as it is. We are just running it for just one off. So I'm just going to click start. And then it's running, so I can click that. And then you can see that the first component is starting. So if I go here and then go to, so it says this step is in a pending state with this message. So it's creating a container. So we will see how what that means later on. So this says that, oh, this component is creating a container to run in, and we can also see if there are some logs. So at the moment there are no logs. We can see if there are some events. So nothing yet. So yeah, let's just, I'm gonna leave this for a couple of minutes and then come back to it when it's running. So as you can see, the first component has been created, has finished running, and yeah, you can check the inputs and then the outputs metadata. You can see some details as to when it is started and when it finished. So this is our ML metadata, the splits and the output configurations. We can look at the statistics component also, and then look at the input and the output artifacts. We can also see the visualizations. So we have already seen things like this when in our previous playlist when we looked at TFX components. Yeah, so this is just, there's also the logs saying that the component has finished. So yeah, we would so this is the input artifact for the statistics gen. So you can see that it takes the component, it takes output from CSV example gen and then outputs its own artifact. So yeah, this is just an example of the pipeline running. So we will build our own pipeline like this later on. So for now, let's I'm going to stop, terminate this run. And I'm not going to delete my Kubernetes cluster because we are going to use it again, and it's not really expensive. We have, I mean, $300 in credit. So yeah, you can leave it running, or you can delete your cluster, and when you are ready to watch the next video, you can create a new cluster. I'm just going to leave my cluster running because I don't want to go through the whole process again. And then in our next video, we will look at how to create this CSV example gen component in Kubeflow. So keep watching.